Hey guys, and welcome back to the FFP. It's time for our Week 3 waiver wire. Here's everything that you need to know. We're going to be going over our top 5 pickups from this week, and then after that, we'll be going by position. There will be some timestamps in the description down below so you can see kind of who we're going to talk about and everything like that. But hopefully, we're just going to give you guys some options. And, you know, honestly, a couple weeks into the season, there's still a lot of talent out there. In fact, I watched some of these games and saw, man, it just looks like there wasn't a big fantasy week. So I thought maybe when we started to do our research, there wouldn't be options out there, but there's certainly a lot of talent out there. As we always say, don't leave dead weight on your bench. Always keep improving, and at the very least, keep talent off of your opponent's bench. So without any further ado, let's get right into it with the first of our top 5 guys, and then again, we'll go by position after that.
So our number one waiver wire pick this week is wide receiver Rondale Moore of the Cardinals. He's available in 67% of leagues out there. He's a rookie second-round pick out of Purdue. This guy is a fast playmaker. He's quick. He's elusive. He's got ankle-breaking cuts. He'll be the type of guy that can use on screens or deep routes, get him out in out in open areas where he can use that speed. In fact, we talked about a little bit in between. Is the thing that I like about him is that you're not going to see it on the stat sheet. It's not maybe the 60-yard touchdown, but it was a play that he had where it was really should have just been like a 1-yard gain. His ability to cut back and to move, his pivot and the ability to accelerate. Reminded me a lot of Barry Sanders. He turned that into like a 5-6-yard gain. It was fun to watch and see his quickness actually in action there. That's what I think you're going to see with this guy once again. Very talented playmaker.
Yeah, so there's, a lot to talk about there. First thing, like, we can nitpick a lot of things there, right? There's, like, in that offense, there's a lot of weapons, or maybe he's a little undersized, but he did produce. I'd say the biggest reason to say, like, if we want to bring some balance to it, he had a phenomenal day, and there's so much to be excited about it. And I know you're going to talk a little bit more about how great he is. One maybe thing to balance there was that some of his stats were not an indicator of how good he is, but how bad the Vikings defense is, so... just total honesty from a Vikings fan, got the hat on. We suck.
Yeah, we're going to make a lot of wide receivers look dominant this year, and a lot of quarterbacks look great. Week 1, the guy went out and he had a good week. 4 catches, 68 yards. Today he goes out, torches the Vikings, 7 catches, 114 yards, and a touchdown. So the guy's very talented. He's got a great quarterback. Now, some are going to disagree with what I'm about to say here, but judge me at the end of the year. I like this guy. I think he's very talented, but don't overpay for him. I do think he has a limited ceiling for a couple of reasons. One, he's smaller. He's 5'7", 180. Now, as far as wide receivers go, I think you can still be out there and be successful. But one, you take a lot of punishment, a lot of physical hits, and then a guy like that, so he's great up to the 20-yard line. But you get in the red zone when the field shrinks and these big physical cornerbacks now, he can't utilize that speed, and they can hit him at the line and they can bump him and get physical. I think it takes away a little bit of that play there. I know you kind of mentioned size-wise too, with some of the other guys, wide receivers that are smaller that have had success.
Yeah, so you talk about he's 5 foot 780 pounds, not big. Now, the thing that I want to say is, I like guys like Wes Welker. I'm comfortable with small wide receivers, but he is pretty small when you talk about it. You mentioned this earlier when we were just talking. Even a guy like Antonio Brown or a guy like Odell Beckham, like they're considered to be a little bit smaller, but even they're like 5'10", and that 3 inches can sometimes make a difference. And I'm going to kind of just steal from you here. Like, it doesn't make a big difference unless you start to get into the tight situations like the red zone, and then that's where it can maybe really start to stand out a bit.
Yeah, no, I think they're going to move him around, get him in motion, stuff like that, so it's going to be hard for cornerbacks to get him at the line. But anyways, today he made the Vikings look silly. But then last week, so the rookie wide receiver chased the Bengals, and then he went out this week. He did have a touchdown, but he didn't look nearly as dominant as he did versus the Vikings. Another reason why I think he has a lower ceiling is Christian Kirk is a good wide receiver. He's quality. And, of course, you got DeAndre Hopkins, who is just an absolute stud. He's always going to be the number 1 guy there. And A.J. Green's not the guy he was a few years ago, but there's some gas in his tank. Did have a touchdown today. So, some of those targets he's going to lose. He's a guy that you can't ignore. You got to draft this guy. If he's out there, pick him up, especially like you had said in Dynasty Leagues, he's got greater value. But if you pick him up, I wouldn't immediately expect him to become your wide receiver 3 right now. He's a guy that I would grab and stash. He's far too electric. And then you look at the one thing that he needs, and the one thing ultimately that every wide receiver needs to be successful is
a quarterback who doesn't suck.
And he's got that. He's got a quarterback that's athletic with a strong arm. He's a must-grab this week, our number 1 guy.
All right, let's get to our 2.
Our number 2 pick this week is a wide receiver, Henry Ruggs, wide receiver out of Oakland. Now, before I get to him a little bit, here's the one thing that I noticed is that, running backs are hard to find already. We're in week 2, and it's hard to find running backs if you're having injuries or effectiveness or whatever. But there's a lot of good wide receivers out there that have a lot of upside.
Yeah.
And he's one of them. I almost put Michael Pittman here, but we talked about it a little bit more with Henry Ruggs because I feel like that Ruggs has got a little bit more upside. He's got better pedigree. former first-round pick last year. In fact, last year, people forget, the 12th overall pick and the first wide receiver taken in the draft.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. Now, we just talked about it, the last guy. The one thing that every wide receiver needs to be successful is
A quarterback.
and you're going to talk about Derek Carr in a little bit.
We
so
will.
Let's just pause on that.
We'll pause on Derek Carr, but man, I'm just going to put it out there. I think he's a little underrated at times.
Yeah, we did a video a couple years ago, and we talked about how underrated Derek Carr is, and we looked at the weapons he had, and he was getting kind of I think people are giving him a little bit of a hard time. This guy's got some talent. I think he's a talented quarterback. Now, go back to Henry Ruggs, our number 2 guy here, who's readily available out there in most leagues. He's seen about 50% available. He's 6-foot star out of Alabama. His rookie season was not impressive if you look at it. And he does have some targets. You know, you look at a guy like Edwards has also got some talent there. And of course, you've got Derek Waller.
Or Renfro as well.
Renfro, yeah.
And they got a lot of guys they like to use.
Yeah. So he's a guy that to look at. He's another guy that you can't just grab and think, okay, now I can plug him in every week, the number 2 guy. But he's definitely a guy that you have to stash. And like the guy that we previously talked about, I think has more value in a dynasty league than a redraft league. But once again, he's got upside. He's very talented. You can't ignore him.
Well, that's just it. And I think the nice thing to know about it, you ever pick up a guy who he's a fair pickup, but every week it feels like it's only 3 or 4 catches for 40 yards. He's not bad, but he's also not great. Like, that's not what you get with Henry Ruggs. You play him based on matchup, and he either does great or terrible. So that is kind of nice that you can really key in on what's going on that week and what his matchup is going to be like.
So our number 3 guy is a running back, Tony Pollard. He is 48% available in leagues. Now, we actually previewed him last week in our waiver wire video, and his percentage didn't fluctuate. A lot of people didn't pick him up, so clearly people aren't taking the advice, right?
It's almost like we don't get a lot of views.
We don't get a lot of views. Apparently, the hundreds of you that watch this don't really dictate the entire fantasy football community. But last week in the video, we said this is a guy that you got to pick up. You go back to last season and last week, he's been looking like the better back. I like Ezekiel Elliott, but there's a lot of miles on that car. He's taking a lot of wear and tear. And Tony Pollard looks more explosive, better cuts, quicker. And we said, you got to grab this guy. Well, he's becoming more than a handcuff right now. Yeah. This week he goes out, he has 13 carries, 109 yards rushing, a touchdown, adds 3 catches, has 31 yards receiving in the air. He had just 3 fewer carries than Ezekiel Elliott. Yeah. In fact, it seemed like as the game went on, he was getting more carries and more usage. They use him more as a wide receiver than Elliott there. He looks explosive through the first 2 games. Now, I think they're going to continue increasing his role. I don't think they're going to have a problem using 2 running backs to keep pressure and to protect their all-pro quarterback. The one thing I will say with this, and this is what I say once again, it's so hard to find running backs. We're throwing this guy out there, but he's not your number 1 guy yet because Ezekiel Elliott is still good. In fact, he had a decent game today. So it's going to limit his upside unless, of course, Elliott gets hurt. But with running backs coming at such a premium, he's a must-grab. Once again, Tony Pollard, 48% available out there, is getting more touches, more carries. We said it last week. And if you wait, he won't be 40% available next week, I guarantee. He's going to fly off the shelves.
Yeah.
Next week, maybe he'll be sitting around maybe 10, 15% available.
Absolutely, and you're going to have to use a waiver spot for him now, which maybe you probably should have just picked him up last week. Here's the thing that gets me. Zeke he's going to be owned in, 99, 100% of leagues. Pollard is only owned in 50% of leagues. That means half of all Ezekiel Elliott, or more than half of all Zeke owners, don't have the handcuff who's actually playing better than him, at least as of recently. Like, you are kicking yourself. Like, you're playing with fire if you don't have Pollard as at least to, again, handcuff's not the word at this point because of how effective he's been, but to handcuff them together, you need the pair at this point.
You definitely have to handcuff if you're Ezekiel Elliott. In fact, if he's not available, if you own Elliott, you need to trade for him right now. In fact, you're going to probably have to pay more than you did last week. I don't know if you can get him.
Yeah.
You got to handcuff him. And even if you don't have him, he's a guy you could throw out there and you could use in large leagues as a flex play. Yeah. And maybe eventually he starts out-carrying Ezekiel, or maybe Ezekiel gets hurt, or whatever it is. He's a guy you just got to grab. Didn't you grab him last week?
I did grab him last week, which actually, I got to owe you. I think you actually went through and processed that for me, so I appreciate that. You're the one who did that because I just kind of gave you my computer and let you go at it because I don't know what I was doing, but I think
you were working on the start sit video.
I think I was. Yeah. I just remember going like, I can't do it right now, so I just like handed it to you, and I appreciate that. But yeah, in fact, I think in a couple of weeks you'll have to consider picking up Zeke as the handcuff to Pollard.
Ooh, that's a bold statement. We'll have to wait and see on that one. Anyways, he's our number 3 guy out there, Tony Pollard.
All right, so our number 4 guy, you gotta consider Derek Carr. At 74% available, he has been too phenomenal not to pick up. Now, we never like to put a quarterback too high on our waiver claims list because, you know, it feels like every week there will be some sort of option you will be able to get by. But how do you ignore a quarterback who in game 1 goes 435 yards and 2 TDs versus the Ravens, and then follows that up for 382 yards and 2 TDs versus the Steelers? huge volume there. He's been incredibly productive. And again, it's nice to see a guy like Henry Ruggs start to emerge and Darren Waller continue to be who he's been. Like, he doesn't have, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers type of weapons, but they got to be an above-average receiving core when you combine the tight ends and the depth they have and all of the talent that they've got there. And for me, what really stood out, and I don't know if this is just me or if you'd agree with that, what really stood out wasn't just the stats. He wasn't capitalizing on matchup. He did that against the Ravens and the Steelers. The Steelers, by the way, who shut down the Bills' offense, and he made the Steelers' defense look bad. Now, this coming week, he goes up against Miami. Miami and the Dolphins give up the 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. That number is drastically skewed by the fact that we are early in the season. You know why? Because week 1, they shut down an NFL debuting quarterback and an average or below average offense in the Patriots. I mean, Mac Jones, as good as he's probably going to be in his career, that was his first game. There are hiccups and struggles that will always happen, and they capitalized on it. Good for them. What happens the next game? Well, they get crushed 35-0. Now, their offensive struggles was Tua not being out there, but they just gave up 35 points. So I don't think that the Dolphins are a great defense at this point. I'd certainly say they're above average, but Derek Carr will be just fine against them. He is a must-pick-up quarterback, and I actually need to make a waiver claim for him because the quarterbacks I have right now have been very lackluster. But do you have anything to add to that, Rob?
What I want to hear from you guys out there, leave a comment. I had fun watching Derek Carr win week 1. Mm-hmm. The first time in their new stadium with actual fans there, and they pull off a win, and it was exciting. Yeah. But didn't a lot of you think that it was going to come crashing down this week versus the Steelers and come crashing back down to earth? I think a lot of people did, and they're surprised. They're 2-0 right now, looking pretty good against 2 very, very good opponents.
Yeah.
So our number 5 guy this week, and I really hate to say him, is SONY MICHELL. He's 40% available, and here's why I hate to say it is because I'm not that excited about him as a pick, but at the one position, running back, you need to find guys, and he's out there and he's available. So you look, Hendrickson actually has been playing pretty well, looked pretty good again today, but he had a rib injury. We have to wait to see the extent of that injury. SONY MICHELL comes in, he has 10 carries, 46 yards, it doesn't look bad. Now in week 1, he didn't have a lot of touches, but some of that could be the fact he had limited touches due to the fact that he got traded there, came to camp pretty late, and is really just going to learn the offense, get familiar with the playbook, and so that also contributed why week 1 he didn't get many touches. Now, he's not as strong in the passing game as Hendrickson is. He's not as versatile. But if he misses any time with the injury, SONY will get the bulk of the carries on first and second down, and he'll carry value in standard leagues. Now, I'll say that he'll be lower in PPR leagues because he's not great. He doesn't have great hands. If you're looking for somebody in PPR leagues that you desperately need running back, I would probably not go that direction. I would go somebody like a McKissick for Washington, who's 71% available, or James White, who's 60% available, who, by the way, a couple seasons ago, finished in the top 10 among running backs in PPR leagues.
Which is crazy, by the way.
It is, yeah. And in fact, James White had back-to-back weeks with over double-digit points.
Or McKissick, who was number 2 for catches last year behind Alvin Kamara. He got you 86 points off catches alone?
Exactly. And I think with Mac Jones, that you talked about, I think they're going to run that offense very conservatively and develop him slowly, which means a lot of short throws. You look at James White, he's going to easily get 100 targets this year. But you look at SONY MICHELL in there, if that injury turns out to be serious, he'll be a top pick this week, and we need to watch and monitor the injury report tomorrow, the next day, and see what happens. But with running back so difficult, how can you not grab this guy and at least put him on your bench? And like you said earlier in the video, maybe you don't need him, but you don't want the guy next to you who's struggling for a running back to have him.
Well, and the thing for me that really stands out, it's not like you're picking him up to run behind, run for the Dolphins where they've got a backup quarterback and their offense clearly struggled. Or, right, this isn't like a really crappy team. Like the Rams' offense is really good. You know what that means? That's probably going to mean a lot of red zone touches. Like if he's the sole back in that offense, he's really likely to get a touchdown.
Makes me think of LeGarrette Blount a few years ago for New England. His yards per carry weren't great, wasn't spectacular, but he finished with 17 or 18 touchdowns rushing.
Was it 3.8 yards per carry, 18 TDs?
Yeah, so.
But let's move on now. We're going to get into it and go by position to continue on with the rest of our waiver wire pickup options. All right, so here we are at the quarterbacks, getting right into it. There are 3 other QBs to consider, but again, I think the number 1 waiver claim QB's got to be Derek Carr. I've been so impressed with him this year. But continuing on, Daniel Jones at 81% available. I'll put it out there, not a big Daniel Jones fan, but you begin to look at some of the numbers, and there's a little bit of value there. Not a lot. He's not going to be, Pat Mahomes for you, but let's break it down. He has combined for over 300 yards and 2 TDs in both of his games. Now, that includes his ability to run. He had 95 rushing yards last game, but ultimately, I don't really care where the yards come from. I just need to see that the yards are happening. And 2 touchdowns in back-to-back games is also pretty good. But here's what stands out to me most, because I don't like him in most games. I don't think those stats were particularly impressive enough for me to put him in this video. What does, I guess impress me or excite me enough to talk about him is that he plays the Falcons this week, who have been absolutely thrashed by opposing quarterbacks. They have given up 8 passing touchdowns to QBs in the last 2 games. 8. Just going to put it out there, Atlanta's defense, they might be as bad as the Vikings defense. That's really bad talk.
That's really bad.
But Daniel Jones, 81% available. Consider him. Another guy to consider is Teddy Bridgewater. He's 83% available, and he's averaged just under 300 passing yards over the last 2 games and had 2 touchdowns apiece. Furthermore, he plays against the Jets, who, despite giving up the 16th fewest or 17th most fantasy points to quarterback, they're essentially been average in what they've allowed to quarterbacks. But they've done it against Sam Darnold and Mac Jones. Again, not a impressive quarterback duo there to be putting up big points on them. So I'd consider them probably a slightly below average to very below average pass defense. Bridgewater could capitalize, though. Jerry Jeudy is still out with injury. And finally, if none of those guys are available of those 3 and you're still looking for a guy, consider Taylor Heineke. 96% available. I'm not huge on this guy. He kind of just comes in as one more option just in case. But he did throw for 336 yards and 2 TDs in his first full game. But he does play Buffalo this week, who have allowed just 1 touchdown to quarterbacks over the air and the ground in both of these games. So tough matchup.
Yeah, that's scary, yeah.
Not huge on that, but I did want to give you one more just in case the first 3 weren't available. I know a few of you guys are in 16-team leagues and stuff like that.
2 quarterback leagues.
2 quarterback leagues, and things can get desperate, but those are definitely some options to consider. Why don't we move on to our next position, the running backs?
Yeah, before you do, there's one thing I like about Daniel Jones. I don't think you mentioned. I know you're trying to keep it brief, but for all the questions with him that might go along with his play or the offensive line, the one thing he has going for him, he's got good weapons on that team. Evan Ingram will get healthy again. He's a decent tight end. Got talent, wide receiver, and Saquon Barkley's a good pass catching back, and so he's got a good surrounding cast. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm glad you said that. It's hard to focus while you've got the Ravens-Chiefs game on, and
I can't help but I got to watch the game while we're doing the video. I mean, it's football, right?
No, it's really hard to talk. I keep wanting to go how did that run go? But let's move on to the running backs now.
So here we are. We're going to talk about some running backs that are out there for you, and we'll probably follow this up with some other things in videos this week to give you more information. But like we've often said, wide receivers are a dime a dozen out there. There's a lot out there, but it's really hard to find running backs. And so you may want to take something like package a good wide receiver together to get a running back. We're going to offer some stuff out there, but there's not a lot that you can trust 100%. First guy I think you need to look at out there that we haven't mentioned is Alexander Mattison, running back of the Vikings. 68% available. He's got a career 4.6 yards per carry. Today, Dalvin Cook left at one point injured, didn't look good. He came back. He got hobbled later, left again, returned again. But if you know him, he's a very talented back, but he's got an issue with injuries. In fact, coming out of college, I was a 1 knock against him. And so if you own Cook, you better handcuff Madison, and you better do it immediately. If Cook goes down, he could immediately become a low-end RB1 in very large leagues or a strong running back 2 in small, mid-sized leagues. So grab Alexander Mattison out there. You definitely got to handcuff this guy, throw him on your bench. You're 1 injury away from having a great running back there. Some people are going to want me to talk about the Jets running back situation, but before I do anything on Alexander Mattison, you want to add?
Yeah, before we move on, here's my one question for you. Do you think that because the Vikings defense is so bad and they're throwing all the time, that also maybe takes just a little bit away from Alexander Mattison? To the point where, and it's like you said, and you kind of already said, but he's not going to be your starter unless Dalvin Cook is out, period. And Dalvin Cook can't be partially out. He needs to be out of the game completely.
Yeah, Alexander Mattison, first of all, he's not Cook, so he doesn't have that talent level. Mm-hmm. And he's not as good in the passing game, but he's decent in the passing game. So I think you can definitely, he's going to get cut, he'll get targets, he'll get catches out there. If Cook goes down, I think he will still have value in PPR leagues. Let's talk about the New York Jets. If you're looking at running backs, they got 2 guys out there. Michael Carter is 50% available. Today he goes out 11 carries, 59 yards. And then Ty Johnson, 91% available. He has 12 carries for 50 yards. So those guys are available out there, and they had some touches. They had some yards. But I tell you what, right now, and then you got to also add the fact that they have Tevin Coleman on that team. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be an ugly year for the Jets. I wouldn't trust any one of those guys at this point. I guess if you have a really large league and you have bench space, you could throw one of them on there. But quite honestly, neither one of them are standing out. They probably got a lot of that yardage because they were behind. Defense is probably in pass coverage, draw plays, etc. I didn't watch the game.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, the quarterback didn't look good. He really has struggled for 2 weeks.
Well, let's put it this way. I'm going to give that, let's hypothetical, both Michael Carter and Ty Johnson, let's say they finish the year 5 yards per carry, which is generous. They will not finish the year at 5 yards per carry. You know what they don't have? An offense that's getting them into the end zone, the pass catching ability to stay out there and help you in PPR, and when they're down big, and they're going to be down big a lot. Like, it's a running back by committee where you're not going to get the volume, you're not getting the goal line touches or the PPR. Like, there's just not enough there. I just can't see picking any of them up. But you got to bring it up because I know people are going to ask about it.
You do. And what I would do is I put them on your watch list, and I would say this. Right now, the coach has said, even back to the preseason, that they're going to use a running back by committee. If he were to come out this week and say, now Michael Carter's our guy, okay, then maybe you grab him. But right now, I would just simply put him on your watch list. Another one out there, people wonder about Zach Moss. 51% available. He had 2 touchdowns today. Okay, he doesn't excite me either. One, it was a blowout, 35-0. His yards per carry were 3.3. He was inactive last week. A healthy scratch. That tells you a little something there, right?
Yeah.
And Singletary's the guy there. So right now, I just would, I wouldn't get that excited about Zach Moss. Maybe if you're Singletary owners, you could handcuff him.
Well, that's my question for you. You did the research on that, so this, but you go back to last week when it was a close game and it counted, they leaned on Singletary. This game's a blowout, 35-0. Were his touchdowns like kind of in the point in the game where they knew they were going to win?
Yeah. Singletary actually was very effective early on. He had a touchdown run, did well. It was later on, the game's out of control, and they rested their guy, honestly.
That's really important to know. When is a big factor there.
Yeah, so don't get excited about the 2 touchdowns. At this point, I wouldn't react. Watching the Baltimore game right now to see how that plays out. In fact, the one guy that's really shining in the Baltimore game is
Freeman.
Yeah,
or
Freeman.
Latavius Murray.
Well, I think the guy that's standing out for me, I mean, they're all getting touches. The fact that offensive line.
Oh, will you say Tyson Williams?
Yeah, he's the
Well, I
one
thought
guy.
that was too obvious.
Yeah, no.
I was waiting.
Guy.
I was thinking too much
This is
about
not a trick.
it.
I'm just saying, we're watching that game because we thought, okay, going into the game tonight, what if, Freeman comes there and lights it up? What if Williams doesn't get as many carries? But I tell you, the guy that they're going with, the hot hand, who's looking really good, is still Williams. So
Yeah.
I don't think a lot's changed in that situation, at least not what we're seeing so far. Do you?
No, I certainly don't think so. It's definitely Tyson Williams. He looks phenomenal, even though Murray did have that touchdown run. But does the way I felt like you were trying to trick
you?
me there?
No, I wasn't trying to
says
trick
something
you.
about how I was raised.
So manipulated you for years. So people would ask, well, what about the Raiders situation there? So Josh Jacobs didn't play today. Drake wasn't effective. Peyton Barber didn't look that good, and Jacobs returned soon. So I don't find value there. One guy you can maybe keep an eye on out there is Cordell Patterson. He qualifies in most leagues as either a wide receiver or a running back. He's 88% available. Maybe you can play in flex leagues that are PPR and are large. One, Mike Davis is not good. They have a terrible defense. They're going to constantly need to throw the ball. And I think he's going to get a lot of things. He's had 14 carries in the last 2 weeks. Today had 5 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown. So maybe if you're very desperate, but here's what I think. I think right now Cordell Patterson is going to turn out to be fool's gold.
Yeah,
So
exactly. He's one of those guys who he's a gadget player, so he can have those moments, but it's never dependable. And he's been in the league long enough where you've seen what you're going to get with him. But let's move on now.
now we're talking about wide receivers. Another wide receiver I like out there is Michael Pittman. 39% available there. Today goes out as 8 catches, 106 yards. A wide receiver, of course, for Indianapolis Colts. We actually touted him going into this year a little bit and talked about the guy's got a lot of potential. He's big and physical. I like wide receivers like that. 6'4", 233 pounds. A second-year wide receiver out of USC. He is their top wide receiver. Hilton's not the player that he was, so even when he comes back, he's not the guy that he was 3 to 4 years ago. Pascal is a quality wide receiver, but he doesn't have nearly the talent. And Paris Campbell, whenever he does come back, he just hasn't fulfilled the potential we saw come out of college. Mm-hmm. So for me, Michael Pittman's your guy there. I like him. Anything you want to add about Michael Pittman?
No. Were you going to talk about Zach Pascal? That may be the only thing to...
Yeah, I was actually going to get right into that. So Zach Pascal out there is 85% available in leagues. He's had 3 touchdowns in 2 weeks. He's selling into the number 2 role at this point. Mm-hmm. But the one concern I do have with him is when those guys do come back, whether it be Hilton or Campbell, whatnot, that might take away some of his targets. So I think that he's a decent fill-in the right matchup, but I don't think he's a great long-term option. But he is 85% available, and he has 3 touchdowns in 2 weeks.
Yeah, so that's what's weird about it, and I said this to you the other day, so I'm going to say it to you guys. If you're looking for a guy who, over the course of the entire season you can rely on, you've got to trust Pittman a little bit more. And for me, it comes down to, we've talked about this, touchdowns are very fickle. Like, it's just, they're hard to repeat no matter how good you are. So when I see 8 catches or 3 touchdowns in 2 games, I got to lean on the catches side. I know that sounds counterproductive because touchdowns are so valuable, but they're so hard to predict that you have to imagine when that volume continues, the touchdowns will eventually show up.
Yeah, we're actually going to talk about that in a little bit. You must have looked at my notes. But anyways, yeah, we'll touch on that a while. But usage matters. Sometimes stats can deceive you. So you got to dive into the stats a little bit and get past some of those initial numbers to know what's really happening on the team. So one guy out there that I'm starting to get excited about, and I don't know what to do with him, is KJ Osborne, the wide receiver for the Vikings. 98% available, second-year wide receiver. Goes out week 1, 7 catches, 76 yards. But hey, he's behind Adam Thielen and Jefferson, which, by the way, he still is. But today goes out 5 catches, 91 yards, and touchdown, and he looked really good. On top of that, the Vikings defense is, what did you say earlier? Horrible. So
miserable, not fun to watch.
They might end up, and they're going to end up at definitely the bottom third. Maybe they could end up very well easily 32nd in the league. They look that bad at this point. So I like the guy. He looks good. There's going to be a logjam for targets. I think he's become a bigger downfield threat than Adam Thielen, but Adam Thielen has been getting a lot of looks in the red zone. In fact, he's a guy that last year had a lot of touchdowns, and already this year he does.
Well, I thought I saw a stat today. I'm going to pull it up real quick. Keep talking. I'm going to pull it up
It's probably stats. So anyways, if you look at this guy, Osborne, he's a guy that's behind Thielen. He's behind Jefferson, but he's definitely now worth a bench stash. You got to put him on your bench. He's going to begin to disappear in larger leagues because he's looked decent, and he'll get a lot of targets in that game. So you got your stat. You want?
I did find it. Adam Thielen, number 4 amongst wide receivers in touchdowns since 2017.
Wow.
I believe he's got close to 40.
Yeah, whoever thought that. So, but once again, Osborne's looking pretty good there. He's a guy that's interesting. So even though my Vikings are 0-2 and disappointing, it's been one bright spot on that team. We have some young talent there. You got Cook and you got Jefferson and Osborne, and so I like that. I liked Irv Smith. Unfortunately, he got hurt, but I think there's another guy there, which is good because they're going to have to score like 60 points a game to win.
65, 80 points, 100, who knows?
Yeah.
But here's the question, and this pops in my head. I'm going to ask it. It's not fantasy relevant. If you're the Vikings and you're like week 10 and you know you're not a playoff team, do you trade Adam Thielen?
Oh, boy, that hurts.
That hurts, but we did it with Diggs and it worked.
Yeah, I think that you have to look at contract, other things like that. And the problem is the trade deadline in football is a lot sooner than other sports.
Yeah.
And I think at that point when we actually had the trade deadline, I'd be shocked if the Vikings really think that they're totally out of it because they play in a division that's not that good.
They do.
I mean, last week everybody lost, so we're actually in first place last week.
First place because we lost in OT. That was our so ugly. I kind of just want us to rebuild. It's been a rough year, and we're only 2 games in.
Yeah. Another wide receiver out there, Sterling Shepard, 44% available. Now he's dealt with injuries, inconsistent quarterback play, new system, new coaches. That's kept him from showing his full potential there. But at stretches, he's looked like he could become the team's top wide receiver. And Daniel Jones, like you said, looked really good year 1, looked really bad year 2, but right now he's looking effective again. So there's some hope there. This week he went out and had 7 catches, 113 yards and a touchdown. In week 1. And then this week on Thursday Night Football had 9 catches for 94 yards. So he's got 16 catches for over 20 yards in 2 games. And next week, he's got a great matchup against the Falcons. It's a great matchup. He's a guy that you have got to play next week.
Sterling Shepard feels like the one that got away. He's got all the talent in the world, everything perfect, but it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
He's just with injuries. But
maybe this is the year that it all comes together for the guy.
Yeah.
Another guy I like out there is Darnell Mooney, 55% available. Fields took over for Dalton this week. The team doesn't think Dalton's injury is serious, but to me it doesn't really matter because Dalton's not a tremendous quarterback anyway, so I don't think it's a loss no matter who you have. But you can feel free to speak that narrative a little bit.
I don't really have anything to add to that. That's the truth. Justin Fields he might not be better, but he can't be worse.
Yeah. So I like Mooney there. The Bears love him entering the 2021 season. They love him so much they got rid of Anthony Miller. Last year's a rookie out of Tulane. He came out. He had a nice season, 61 catches, 631 yards. That doesn't sound like great numbers, right? 60 catches, 600 yards. Doesn't stand out as amazing, but when you consider the quarterback issues they had last year and the offensive struggles, that's actually a very nice season.
Yeah.
He's had 15 targets in 2 weeks. And I think for me, you talked about it earlier, to me the targets sometimes can mean actually more than the actual stats themselves. Because you can see a player where fantasy football owners react. He might go out, he might have 80 yards and a touchdown, or he might finish with 100 yards and a touchdown, but he gets 3 targets.
Yeah.
A guy like Deontay Harris for the Saints last week, or Kez Watkins for Philadelphia. I don't even know how you say his first name.
I have no idea.
Whatever. Somebody's going to correct me, but whatever. It's been a long day.
We're dumb.
Yeah. But guys like that, it's not sustainable if you're not getting the usage. But you know what he is? 15 targets in 2 weeks. He's looking really good. He's a guy that you definitely need to consider. He's clearly the number 2 guy.
Well, the other wide receiver there, Allen Robinson, is a perfect example of that. He got the targets week 1 and the production wasn't there. He bounced back just fine in week 2. You know why? Because he had to go against Jalen Ramsey, right? So, like, again, the targets are what matters. And again, it's counterproductive. It doesn't make sense. But in the long run, it shows you if the team wants to use that player.
Yeah. And I got to Jalen Waddle, 32% available out there. He had a good week 1. He had a great first half today, and then Tua goes down, gets injured. Brissett comes in after that. A lot of guys struggled. So you're going to have to monitor the quarterback situation, determine his value, but keep an eye on him. Then you have Marquez Brown. This one I don't get. Hollywood Brown. 35% available, former first-round pick. He's very talented. Don't let your stats fool him. His ceiling is capped by Lamar Jackson's play. He's a former first-round pick who's talented. In fact, you talked about a compilation video, or what was that?
Somebody posted, I think it was on like TikTok or on YouTube. It was like just like 3 or 4 minutes of every time Lamar ran it instead of throwing to a wide-open Marquez Brown.
Yeah. So he's a guy that's actually really talented. He had nice progression statistically from year 1 to year 2. Another one out there is Marvin Jones, 37% available. This one's tough. He plays for the Jaguars. Lawrence is going to struggle, has been struggling, but the defense is bad. They'll be playing from behind constantly. And he's had 20 targets and 11 catches and 2 touchdowns in 2 games.
Well, you know, I called it because remember week 1, the guy who led there for targets was DJ Chark. And I said after DJ Chark's poor performance, the target leader will be Marvin Jones. And sure enough, he was.
Yeah. So he's a guy that it's not an exciting play, but if you're in a larger league, he could definitely help you win a few games in bye weeks with injuries or if you're in deep leagues. Tim Patrick, he had back-to-back touchdowns. I want to talk to him real quickly there. One, his targets have been low. Sutton is clearly the man there, and Judy will be back soon, at least in a few weeks, we're thinking, the ankle injury. And it's not a high-octane offense, so even though he provides some help, I think he's very limited upside. And then if you want to look at one more guy I'll kind of throw out there, this is in PPR leagues, a guy who I think is has Cole Beasley type of potential in PPR leagues. In deep leagues is Hunter Renfrow. You talked about him.
Yeah.
You know, the wide receiver for the Oakland Athletics. I'm taking baseball here.
They're not even from Oakland. They're in LA.
It's been a long
He's
day.
like, the
They're
Go
Oakland
Mets.
Athletics. I meant the Oakland Raiders. Oh, wait, they're in Vegas now. God have mercy on me. If you guys see this here, can I get a mulligan?
This explains why no one's been watching the videos.
This is it. Should we just start this one over? No way. It's been 8 minutes. We're just keeping this. Have mercy on us. So anyways, Hunter Renfrow, 94% available for the Vegas Raiders. He's had 15 targets and 11 catches. Now his yards will be lower, but in PPR leagues, he's a guy you could play as a flex play. And if you're in a daily fantasy league, he's a guy that you could throw on there for a cheap play also.
He's always super cheap for sure.
Okay. So anyways, besides that, since we couldn't decide if we're talking about baseball or football, those are some wide receivers to consider.
Just want to. How many of those mistakes have we missed?
Oh God, probably too many to count.
All right, so now we're getting into the tight ends, and you know what? We talked earlier. You mentioned it. There's not a lot of talent at the running back position. There's arguably less at the tight end position. So this is probably going to be pretty brief and pretty quick, but here's your options that I feel like are maybe some of the guys to consider. One is Jared Cook at 57% available. Not amazing, but if you look back at his last 2 seasons, the 2 previous years, he scored 16 TDs in 29 games. That means he's got a little bit greater than 50% chance to find the end zone for you. So in a standard league, that is definitely a nice option to consider. He does go against the Chiefs, who have struggled against tight ends. In fact, they gave up 100-plus yards to the Browns tight end combo and Njoku and Hooper, who are less than excellent there. So that's definitely a good matchup to consider. And he's just going to average you about 40 or 50 yards a game. So you are depending on that touchdown. So remember that, not a stud in PPR, but he's a fairly safe pickup option there. Another guy that I would keep an eye on but wouldn't pick up is Pat Freiermuth. At 93% available, he's really beginning to take over that role from Eric Ebron. In fact, go back to this last game. Eric Ebron saw 2 targets but had 0 catches. Meanwhile, Pat Freiermuth caught all 4 of his targets for 36 yards. Not a super impressive day, but he's beginning to etch out a larger role in that offense. And again, this was not his first good game. Go back to the preseason, he had some good performances then. Jack Doyle is 99% available. He's a guy to look his way. He had 8 targets, 5 catches, and 64 yards. So that is definitely a guy to consider there. Now, he goes up against the Titans this week, who give up the fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends, but that stat is deceiving. With just 2 weeks of football, they've only gone against Gerald Everett and Demetrius Harris. That's not a competitive tight end group to push those linebackers. And so he could have a good week this week. I don't love him, but he might be your best plug-and-play option this week in PPR. Again, I think in standard, though, you got to go Cook. And then finally, Dan Arnold, 96% available. He caught 3 of his 4 targets for 55 yards, and he's clearly settled himself as the lead passing game tight end over Ian Thomas, who had just 1 catch for 7 yards last week. And finally, he does go up against the Texans. That's a bad defense and a good matchup for him. Kind of flew through the stats there real fast, but again, that just comes from maybe just being lack of impressed. So there's a few options for you, but hey, I tell you what, I was in the draft. I took Travis Kelce, and what did I say to you when I took Travis Kelce? I said, maybe that was a mistake. I missed some stud receivers. I missed some stud running backs. But I'm going to be honest with you right now, looking at the waiver wire, kind of happy I have Kelce, right? So, that's something to consider, but there are your options right there. Let's move on to the kickers, and you got something to add, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that, so for me, I'm in a dynasty league. I don't like my tight end. I'm not going to find someone on the waiver wire I don't feel confident in. So I've been, right now today, kind of working on a trade, trying to get a tight end, because there's not a lot out there. And so actually what I'm trying to do is make a move for Kyle Pitts, and I'm definitely giving him more than he's worth, but I'm going to take that chance.
You're going to have to sell your soul.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to.
After that last game. What did he do in the last game? Was it like 76 yards or something?
Yeah, he looked good. I think it was 5 catches, 73 yards.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. Let's move on to the kickers, though. All right, so there's actually, of all the positions, kickers, there's the most talent. So I'm going to fly through this because there are 4 solid options that you need to consider. One is Graham Gano, 96% available. He went 5 for 5 on field goals last game. 2 of them were more than 50 yards, and 1 of them were more than 40 yards. He looked phenomenal. And he goes up against the Falcons, who gave up 32 and 48 points over the last couple weeks. This is going to be a great week for Graham Gano, and he is certainly a good kicker, very effective last week. Also, Nick Folk, he is 94% available. He's made 3 field goals in both of the last games, has not missed a field goal this year, though he has missed an extra point. Not sure what's up with that, but hey, as long as the field goals are there, who cares? Dustin Hopkins at 93% available. He has also made 3 field goals in both of the last 2 games, so that's another thing to consider. He's been kicking the ball a little bit more than I expected, and he's been accurate, so there's another option there. And then finally, Daniel Carlson, maybe the best of the kickers that we mentioned right here. He is 69% available. He has scored 11 and 13 fantasy points in his 2 games. And again, we've talked about Ruggs, we've talked about Carr in this video. I like Carlson. He's not only a good kicker, and a very productive offense. So if he's not kicking you field goals, you're at least getting extra points. So that feels like a very safe situation there and a very safe kicker. But again, because of his talent, there's still upside there. So he might be the best kicker out there available for you. But either way, there's a lot of options. All right, so now we're on to the defenses. I've just got 2 defenses for you to consider. I think if you, at this point, are looking at defenses, you're really just looking at a week-to-week thing. You're not getting a defense that's going to last you 5 or 6 weeks in a row that you're going to must start. So one of them is Arizona at 48% available. They've got huge upside. Now, I don't know if you want to address it, but they didn't look so great in their Week 2 matchup versus the Vikings offense. But they looked phenomenal in Week 1. They had 6 sacks and 3 turnovers versus the Titans. So then they go against Minnesota, and they struggle. But again, that's a Minnesota offense. Last year, Kirk Cousins had 36 TDs. I think that was like 5th among quarterbacks. He was very underrated. You've got Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, arguably probably one of the 2 or 3 best wide receiver combos in the league. And you talked about KJ Osborne emerging. He's been solid as well, and Dalvin Cook. And so they're a phenomenal offense. I'm going to be honest with you. When you add in garbage time stats, I don't think there are a whole lot of defenses that are going to be good fantasy against the Vikings. Am I right? As much as teams are probably going to beat up on the Vikings, those defenses probably not going to shine. What I like them most for is they go against the Jaguars. 5 picks in the last 2 games. This is a matchup play, and you got to love it. The Jaguars scored 21 points in a crappy blowout versus a terrible Houston defense. They should have scored more than 21, and they shouldn't have been down in the first place.
And wasn't one of them a kick return?
Yeah, well, and then that was the other one. They scored just 13 points in their last game. That was a blowout. So that was another very bad game for them. Let's move on to another one that we have to consider, and that is Carolina. At 82% available, they play the Texans this week. Carolina has 10 sacks in 2 games. They've allowed just 14 points in their first game and 13 points in their second game. And I think the stat you're referring to, you may have been a little confused, was from this.
Oh, that's right.
Their second game where they allowed 13 points, 6 of those were a kick return for touchdown with 2 minutes left in the game. They already knew they were going to win. Not really on the defense, if we're being honest. So again, you got to play by matchup. You have to play it week to week, especially at defense, because things change a lot from week to week. So considering them, Carolina and Arizona, I think they could both have fantastic weeks. But that's all I have to say for it. Just two guys for you to consider. You want to add anything to that?
No, I think we're good there.
All right, so that is the video there. Broke down every position for you and hopefully gave you some options to consider. As always, leave a comment down below if you need to consider who maybe to drop to make those pickups or which of those options you like. Or, hey, some of you guys are going to get lucky and you're going to have talent out there that's a little bit better than this. I've seen every once in a while, it's not common, but every couple of years in the league, I see a guy drop the #1 quarterback, or like it just stupid things happen. And so, maybe that's something to consider. But as always, guys, like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. The better we do as far as the views and the likes go, to be quite honest, the more motivated I am to do a good job. Yeah. So I think that makes a big difference. We really appreciate you guys and all of your support. You have a wonderful day, and God bless.